I'm shocked by the administration and in particular the president's response to the November election. Usually when presidents are repudiated in elections, they say, well, maybe I ought to reassess. Instead, he did just the opposite. He did this surge which went contrary to the will of the American people. I think we need to do something serious in terms of accountability, and that's why I will be shortly introducing censure resolutions of the president and the administration. One on their getting us into the war of Iraq and their failure to adequately prepare our military and the misleading statements that have continued throughout the war in Iraq.
My guess is that there will be notable military progress to report in September. There's already some now.
Come on, guys. I mean, acknowledge there's a problem here. We're not winning in this thing. And it's not, I could see, if you say to me, don't encourage the terrorists, okay, we don't want to do that. We want stability in the Middle East.
Juan, you need to read the news more carefully and recognize that when you say we're not winning, that we may now well be winning.
Okay. And a second on this administration's outrageous attack on the rule of law, all the way from the illegal terrorist surveillance program to their attitude about torture.
I want to be very, very clear. We have not, we do not, and we will not ever use torture. So torture's never been on the table.
Are we, with this new program, with new limits on interrogation, are we limiting, are we compromising our ability to get information from these very dangerous people?
Absolutely not. And what we did over time was look at what did we need for it to be legal.
Is it fair to say that some of the techniques that were used earlier are no longer being used?
It's a different program going forward today, that's correct.
Does this new executive order allow measures that if were used against a U.S. citizen who was apprehended by the enemy would be troubling to the American people?
I can report to you that it's not torture. Let me just leave it by saying the techniques work. It's not torture. You're not subjected to heat or cold, but it is effective.
And we would find it acceptable if a U.S. citizen experienced the same kind of enhanced interrogation measures?
Tim, it's not torture. I would not want a U.S. citizen to go through the process, but it is not torture.
Many of these countries are not our ideal Jeffersonian democracy. We can't expect them to meet all of our standards. We're pretty sloppy in some areas ourselves.
What I am proposing is a moderate course, not tying up the Senate and the House with an impeachment trial, but simply passing resolutions that make sure that the historical record shows the way they have weakened our country militarily and against al-Qaeda.
We're stronger. We have more capability, better and more intelligence, better and more law enforcement, better military capability. So we're stronger. We've enjoyed a lot of success against al-Qaeda. We've disrupted plots here in the homeland, like the JFK plot, the Fort Dix plot.
I want you to respond to what we just heard from the President's Homeland Security Advisor, Fran Townsend. Do you have confidence in her and in the administration's handling of Homeland Security right now?
No. We've made some significant steps forward, but we had recommendations from the 9/11 Commission to do specific things to make America safer. And they've given a report card to this administration year after year, a failing report card. The administration has failed to enact the laws, to enact the appropriations necessary to make these recommendations the law.
The government this week announced that it's going to allow airline passengers to bring back lighters onto airplanes, even though, and I know this, you can't bring a bottle of water through the security still.
This isn't about whether or not you bring a lighter. What we're looking for is to make sure that we're keeping off a plane potentially component pieces of an explosive device.
And a lighter, real quickly, a lighter that can put up a flame, that's not dangerous?
We don't believe that will be a part of a large explosive device inside an aircraft, no.
Is the United States safer today than it was before 9/11?
No question that that's true.
This administration has assaulted the Constitution. We need to have on the historical record some kind of indication that what has happened here is, in the words of Director McConnell, as you just quoted him, disastrous. This administration has done the greatest assault on our Constitution perhaps in American history. The American people are outraged at the way they've been treated. They are outraged at the dishonesty that they have been subjected to. The American people, we deserve better than the way we've been treated, and somehow this has to be reflected.
I think it's safe to say Russ Feingold is not a fan of George Bush. I think that's the best way to sum that up. The president's done a lot of things that have been very, very negative. Bruce Fein, a Republican constitutional scholar, has said that he's done more things to take away power from the people in the Congress than any president in history. He's violated the rights of the Constitution in many different ways. He's been here as part of a culture of corruption. He is spying on Americans. The Justice Department is now a hiss and a byword.
So would you go along with it if they let you vote on it?
Bob, frankly, we have so many other things to do. The president's already has the mark of the American people that he's the worst president we've ever had, and I don't think we need a censure resolution in the Senate to prove that.
This is not only an unpopular presidency, it's a failed presidency. It's a presidency that has abused the Constitution and the powers of the office, whether it's misleading the American people into the war in Iraq, not preparing our troops for battle as they should have been prepared, making certain that he endorses a warrantless wiretapping program, telling the Department of Justice not to enforce the law last week when we come to contempt of Congress by members of his administration. All of these things suggest to me that this administration has gone far beyond the exercise of political power.
I left the 110-minute session with President Bush thinking that far from being worn down by the past few years, Bush seemed empowered. His self-confidence is the most remarkable feature of his presidency. No second-guessing about the war in Iraq?
Not really, no. I mean, on the little things, it's interesting. On the big things, I don't think there has been second-guessing. Bob would call it a state of denial. His faith in his own power, the power of the presidency to change the world. He has not budged on that. And so you might think that's strong leadership. You might think he's deranged. What has changed, I think, is a little more honesty and tactical flexibility now that Donald Rumsfeld is gone. I think they've hired people like Mike McConnell who are much more honest and who are much more willing to look realistically at the situation.
It says here in November of 2006, Michael McConnell, who had been working on intelligence issues in the private sector since resigning from the NSA in '96, was asked to consider joining the Bush administration as the nation's top intelligence official. McConnell was honored to be asked, but had serious reservations. He had been unimpressed with many aspects of the Bush administration and its conduct of the war on terror, particularly what he felt was a politicized use of intelligence in lead up to the war. All of these current players, Secretary Rumsfeld, Vice President Cheney, and the President, McConnell said in an interview in late November '06, "What's come through for me as a citizen, I'm no longer in active duty, so I can say these things. They had first and foremost very strong political convictions. My sense of it is their political faith and convictions influenced how they took information and interpreted it, how they picked up and interpreted outside events. As a former Intel pro, when you don't like the answer and you set up your own thing, you tend to get the answer you want. You hire people who think like you do or want to satisfy the boss. I've read much more about the current set of players, and they did set up a whole new interpretation because they didn't like the answers. They've gotten results that, in my view, now have been disastrous." That's pretty harsh.
Indeed. We're all influenced by what we see and hear and read. I am a concerned citizen.